Hi, welcome to another tutorial in the quadratic equations series. This is on completing the square, which is a method for solving quadratic equations, and also just a good thing to know how to do. It has uses outside of solving quadratic equations, but it can be used to solve quadratic equations, so there you go. That's why it's in this particular series. So what you're doing when you complete the square is a little bit like factoring. You're going to take the general form of a quadratic equation, like ax squared plus bx plus c, and then you're going to put it into a new form. So the new form looks like this. It's going to be some constant k times x minus something alpha squared plus something else, alright, beta, equals 0. Okay, so that's pretty much what you're trying to do. As you can see, it'd be pretty easy to solve for x when it's in this form. This is called vertex form, by the way. When it's in vertex form, because all you have to do is subtract beta, divide by k, square root, and add alpha, and that's pretty much it. So we'll do an example of that in a minute. But first, let's learn how to do this arrow, how to convert it to vertex form using completing the square. Completing the square is not the only way that you can do that, but it's kind of the easiest. Okay, so let's make up something to work with. I'm going to do 3x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so you could do this with the quadratic equation. This won't factor, I think. Will it? It might, actually. Yeah, I think it will. Maybe not. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Anyway, you could do it with the quadratic equation, but we'll do it with completing the square. Completing the square will work for any quadratic equation, so that's pretty nifty. Okay, step 1 is to factor a out of the first two terms. Okay, the first two terms. So what do I mean by that? It's pretty easy. All I mean is rewrite it by dividing the first two terms by a. So in this case, a is 3. So we write 3, and then a parenthesis, then x squared. That'll always be x squared, and then 2x over 3, which is 2/3 x. Okay, you can leave c alone, which is -1, and you leave the right-hand side alone. And there you go. So the idea is if you multiplied this 3 through, then you would get 3x squared plus 2x. So we haven't really changed the equation, it's just changing the form, which is all we're doing in this whole process. So, step 2, and this is the trickiest step. Okay, add, let's see. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm going to add b over 2 squared in the parentheses, and a times b over 2 squared on the right hand side. Okay, so this is the trickiest step. What we're going to be doing, it might help. This is what you'll do is sometimes people rewrite their equation like this. Okay, and then they leave a little space because we're going to add something in there. Have the -1 here and then the 0 here. So what we're going to do is come in here and add b over 2 squared basically to both sides. So one of the rules of working with equations is if you do something to both sides of the equation, then it's not going to change the value of the solution. It's not going to change the solution as long as you're a fair mathematician. So what we're trying to do here is add something to both sides of the equations both sides of the equation, which is going to allow us to change the form of one side of the equation. So what we need to add is b divided by 2 squared. So b over 2 is, let's do purple. b over 2 is 2 over 6. Okay, you see what I did there? It's 2 over 3 divided by 2, so it's 2 divided by 6 squared. Okay, that's going to be 4 over 36. So, yeah, when you complete the square, things don't always turn out super pretty, but that's the idea. We get 4 over 36. So what we do is we add that inside the parentheses. 4 over 36. And then this is kind of why this is tricky. Because we're adding this within the parentheses, when we add it to the other side, we have to multiply it by this factor here, 3. Because really what we're doing is adding 3 times 4 over 36 and then basically factoring the 3 out. Okay, this is hard to explain, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Because we're adding the 4 over 36 within the parentheses, we have to add 3 times 4 over 36 to the other side. Okay? That's basically how that works. Okay, now that's the big leap in completing the square. After you do that, it's pretty easy. Let's see, how shall we write this? I'll just say write or rewrite with x minus b over 2 squared. Okay, so what we're doing here, let's move things down. 3 times x squared plus 2/3 x. So the basic idea is if you saw in vertex form, we have that x minus alpha squared. So what we're doing when we complete the square is we're adding something to the first two terms in order to make it, so we can like compress it into an x minus alpha or x minus something squared. Okay, that's where the name comes from, is you're completing the square so you can compress it. Completing the square is probably like the hardest one to explain of all the 3 methods for solving quadratic equations, but I'm doing my best here. Anyway, so rewrite with x minus b over 2 squared. So because we added this 4 over 36, we can now rewrite this as 3 times x, I believe this is actually, it should be plus b over 2. Sorry about that. 3 times x plus, okay, b over 2 we decided was 2 over 6 squared, okay, minus 1 equals, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply this. 3 times 4 is 12, so we have 12 over 36. Okay, so you could confirm this if you want. You could go ahead and re-multiply out this x plus 2 over 6 squared, and what you're going to get what we have in the parentheses, you know, here in pink. So the idea is we had to add the 4 over 36 in order to make it so we could compress it into this squared form. Okay, so the final step is just simplify. Okay, it's sort of just like cleaning up after all that mess. Let's do a nice gray. Okay, so let's see, so do we want it to equal 0? I guess we do, because we're going to be solving it. So 3 times x plus 1/3 squared minus 1 minus 12 over 36. Or actually 12 over 36 is just 1/3, right? So it's pretty simple. Okay, now let's write the final one in a nice orange. 3 times x plus 1/3 squared. Okay, negative 1 minus 1/3 is going to be negative 1 and 1/3, or let's see, that would be negative 4/3. Okay, equals 0. Alright, there we go. We've got it into vertex form. it was a huge pain. I mean, if you thought factoring was bad, completing the square. But you know, if you think about it, it's really not that bad. Once you sort of internalize the process and you're not trying to understand, okay, why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Once you understand like what you need to do, it's pretty quick. I mean, it's not that hard. The hard part is understanding why you're doing what you're doing. But if you can get past that, it's really not that hard. You just add, you know, you factor out a from the first two terms, you add b over 2 squared, and then a times b over 2 squared to the other side, okay? And then you just rewrite it with the squared and then simplify. Okay, it's really not that bad if you do it, you know, several times to the point where you internalize the idea. Okay, so this is vertex form, but we haven't actually solved for the solutions yet, so we'll do that, but it's pretty quick. X plus 1/3 squared equals 4/3. Okay, wrote it out over there. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 3. X plus 1/3 squared equals, wow, this is going to turn out surprisingly well. I wasn't expecting this to happen. Ooh, I'm actually out of room vertically. Didn't make my file big enough. Okay, so from here we're going to take the square root of both sides, but what you have to be careful of is to take plus or minus the square root. That's just kind of a rule for when you take the square root of something. So x plus 1/3 is plus or minus the square root of 4/9. So I keep switching colors, you know, keep things entertaining, you know. So x plus 1/3, okay, square root of 4 is 2. Let's see, this is plus or minus 2/3. Careful, these are parentheses. I just evaluated the square root. It won't always turn out that pretty, but we got lucky. Okay, so our final answers are x equals negative 1/3 plus or minus 2/3. Okay, so what, that's going to be 1/3 and negative 1? I think that's right. Yeah, so x equals positive 1/3 and x equals negative 1. Okay, there you go. Those are solutions. So completing the square is a lot more about getting something into vertex form. Solving it from there, I mean, it's just pretty much basic algebra. You just have to remember to do the plus or minus square root is probably where you'd go astray there. But the real point of completing the square is to get something into vertex form. So there you go. 4 steps. My suggestion is to just do them to the point where you kind of, like I said, where you internalize the steps. I mean, all you do, like I said, if you do this enough times, it's just factor. I mean, you can look at this and just say, okay, I'm going to factor out the 3, get the 2/3. b over 2 squared, that's going to be 2/3, or 2/6 squared. That's 4/36, and then you just go through, make it into a squared, and then it's solving from there. Okay, so that's completing the square. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks.